Well, it's 11:03, so why don't we go ahead and get going? Uh, I am Paul Vinsel. I'm the chair of the Governance Committee and a member of the Maine Recovery Council. We'll go ahead and start with introductions, and we'll start with you, Chastity.
Hey everyone, Chastity Toole, she, her pronouns, Executive Director of the Maine Recovery Council.
And Brendan.
Brendan O'Neill from the Maine Attorney General's Office.
And Tess.
Tess Parks, and I was appointed by the Attorney General.
Joe.
Good morning, Joe Everett from the Opportunity Alliance, member of the council and chair of the Program and Grants Committee.
And Elizabeth.
Hello, I am Elizabeth Fortier, and I'm the coordinator for the Maine Recovery Council.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. And if anyone else comes on late, we will introduce them. So we don't have quorum right now in order to act or to vote on any proposal, but we can have a meeting. And on the agenda, I think what we'll do, Chastity, is I want to stick to the agenda, but I want to get back when we do other business to talk about adding another person to the committee. So we'll discuss that later, okay? All right. And since Maggie's not here, I'm going to try to keep notes. I'm going to do the best I can. And if I fail in the middle of it, I'll just ask Maggie to, she said she would do it by looking at the video, but I'll try to do it as we go. So first thing on the agenda is discussion to amend the council bylaws. And the purpose of this is to allow the executive director to access funds for certain administrative payments without approval from the chair or full council. And if we were to have a vote and make a recommendation or a recommendation for a change to the Maine Recovery Council, that would have to be placed on the agenda of the Maine Recovery Council at least 2 weeks before the meeting. And the next meeting is 2 weeks from yesterday. So Chastity was good enough. I really appreciate this thought. Tess, go ahead before we.
Hi, Paul. Just quickly, I will take notes. I know it's really hard to facilitate and take notes at the same time. So
Oh,
I'll
thanks, Tess. I appreciate it.
after.
So Chastity was good enough to write a possible amendment. And did you go ahead and put that in the notice of meeting for the Maine Recovery Council, Chastity? Okay, great. So we have a proposed amendment, and it's on the notice of meeting for the Recovery Council in 2 weeks. So I think we should go ahead and discuss that and see. We won't be able to vote on it, but we can all voice our opinions on it. So Grayson or Chastity, would you be able to put that up?
Are you doing it, Grayson, or do you need me to?
If you have it pulled up, that would be helpful. I don't have it pulled up, but I can get it pulled up. Okay, I got it. Keep being to it. Thank you.
Okay, great. And this would be in section 5.4. And section 5.4, we made a change in that early on when Mary was the executive director. And this allowed the chair to approve expenditures less than $5,000 without going through the be through the whole recovery council, which speeded things up for Mary and Pat. And what this amendment would do, and I'll go ahead and read it. The chair may designate the executive director to approve, within limits established by the council or the chair, such routine or pre-approved expenditures as the chair deems appropriate, including reasonable travel expenses, administrative expenses, and payments to vendors previously authorized by the council. Any such designation must require periodic reporting to the chair of all delegated approvals. So what I think this does, which I thought was really good, because when I wrote the agenda, I wrote that it would allow the executive director to access funds for certain administrative payments without approval from the chair or the full council. This clearly states that it must be approved by the council or the chair, but it could be pre-approved. So something that we've already voted on or already discussed, and that allows the executive director to access those funds. So I'm going to open this up for discussion from anyone here. Brendan, go ahead.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just restate something I wrote in an email when the draft language was circulated for, the purposes of transparency, which was that, is that the committee and the council, should consider whether the chair should be restricted to being able to delegate only administrative expenses, which, are generally what's described in the parenthetical. But the way I read it, the language currently would permit the chair to delegate other expenses, such as grants, which, in my view, I thought should stay at the council level.
And when I look at that, one of the things I found with this amendment was that it was pretty broad. It didn't have a lot of, it didn't state the amount of, limits of amount. So I think you're right, Brendan, that we may want to specify that it should say for administrative expenses. And I'm wondering if we should put a limit of $5,000 like we did with when we approved the approved the chair to spend those money without the council meeting, without the council direct approval. Tess, you had a question or a comment?
Yes. So when I'm reading it, the clause in payments to vendors previously authorized by the council, assuming we're referring to payments that were established through a grant process that the council then approved, I'm not viewing it as giving the ED discretion on grant payments. Because I think the issue is, from what I've heard, I think this came up at a previous meeting, we have Chastity and Pat driving hours and hours for getting signatures. And to me, that is a giant waste of our time in terms of paying Chastity to do that. So I want to be flexible and nimble enough so that we're not creating barriers. Chastity, did you have any comment on that?
Sorry, when I'm screen sharing, I lose some of my stuff. Yeah, I think some of my intent, like Brendan, I put some of this in email in doing this, was thinking stuff like council mileage, which is like really easy. payments to when we have vendors like Barry Dunn, being able to approve that. Signing contracts, like that wasn't part of it when I was writing it originally, but then when it came up, I think that's worthy of a discussion. Like that's all stuff that council's already voted on. That's all tagged in. One of the things that came up in talking about that was making sure there's still someone on the council who can see contracts, and I think that could be done. I just, we're not always going to have a retired chair. And if there's a way that we can take some of the burden off of that person and streamline things, I think it would be helpful.
Chastity, what are some of the payments that you or Pat has had to travel long distance to get signed? That I
All of the
agree.
grant contracts, when it's batches, I drive to meet Pat, get a signature, and then take it to the AG's office. That's how I had to do it last time. I may not have to go from Pat to the AG's next, but being able to remove that would be helpful. And
Mhm.
apparently Mary always took the contracts and would have to take them to her to sign. So
So that so even the grants uh, create a kind of an undue burden on you and Pat. And these are things, I agree with Tess, that we have already approved. And Chastity, when you take those to Pat to have her sign them, she has already seen them and given you verbal okay. Is that correct?
yeah, she gets copies emailed and looks through them. So it's literally just for the signature.
Okay.
So I feel very strongly about this evolution of the council. You know, we hired if we aren't going to empower Shasta, I'm not sure why we have the role. So I think that we need some language, and I'm not, Brendan, to your point, the contract approval. Like I think the day-to-day operation of the executive director needs Chastity, we need to empower you to sign a few things. And at my job, and I've said this before, the board that's a motion annually that gives me authority within reason to do things. So that's my hope. When I read it, that's what I thought I read, Chastity, in your work. But I do feel like this is the evolution of the council. We started with Pat. We now have staff, and I think um, for you to do your job, I think you need this within reason. And I don't really have I don't care about the number. I'm just trying to make it. And I think that for me, um, you get paid, Chastity. So if you have to drive 17 hours, you're getting paid. People waiting for their money, and we're not fast enough. We're not nimble enough to get contracts out. So we have people waiting, and that bothers me. And I think that people are talking about it. So we need to be more efficient. And to me, this moves in that direction. And I feel bad that you have to drive, but you are getting paid. Pat isn't. But so that's my 2 cents. I think I'm not married to what it is, but I think empowering the ED to have some signing authority is sort of, I see as the evolution of the council.
Mhm.
And this language, I am not married to what I wrote. Like this was a attempt at the very last minute to make sure we have something. So I will not argue about the language that any of you decide to change.
Well, thank you, Tess and Joe and Chastity, for that. I really appreciate that. And let's look at the specific language. The chair would designate the executive director to approve these. Um, would that be in real time, or would that be the chair designating her before? Like, if Pat would Pat say to you with each expenditure, yes, or would Pat just give you a yes and say for the next 2 months you can approve these expenditures. How would that work, Chastity?
What I envision would be like I'll use the mileage thing is just if it needs to be annually, just like giving the approval, like approve mileage annually because the chair run is an annual thing. So when Tess sends in her mileage after a meeting, instead of sending it to the chair to review and send back and then we submit, I could just approve and submit. Um, so I guess it would be for you guys to decide how to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it'll look like with, future chairs, but right now, Pat and I meet weekly and check in. So it could be something that changes weekly or is removed weekly. Like I feel she could do that. And that's also part of the periodic reporting to the chair is in those weekly check-ins, they'd know like this is what came up this week and what was approved.
It would make sense to me that mileage things should be, like you say, just a stamp of, that you can do those. On the, on the other hand, grant contracts, I think I would want her to individually approve those.
I think those are two different things anyways, because the grant contract process is a completely different process and timeline and um, we work on a schedule with that. So I think that's fine. Like each schedule that we had, we could have the chair acknowledge via email, like something.
Mhm. That would be fine by me. Um, and I think that this is good that it says within limits established by the council or the chair and routine or pre-approved. So it's clear that these are expenditures that have been pre-approved by the chair or the council. And then it has some examples including, but it doesn't specifically exclude anything. And any such designation must require periodic reporting to the chair of all delegated approvals. Um, how the periodic reporting, how often would that occur?
I think you guys and the chair define that.
Okay.
If it's just verbal, meet with the chair weekly. If it's in writing, I think you guys define that.
I think we're stuck between kind of oversight and in the weeds. So Brendan, what are the risks? Like what's anything keeping you up at night in this conversation?
The one point that I thought I was thinking about in response to Paul's question was whether or not the reporting whether there's a role for the treasurer in the reporting, because what we're talking about is expenditures, and to the extent that there's a couple of eyes on the council, especially the one who's focused on the finances, keeping track of what these expenditure or what any of the council's expenditures are. There's an ability to sort of ask questions about those things. I think that would be helpful, but Joe, as you've talked about, maybe that's not normal in other kinds of grant making entities, maybe that's not the right role if the chair is already providing that oversight. Uh, you know um I do like I am um thinking that the council members really do have ultimate responsibility for the administration of these funds. And to the extent that I do want to make sure that there isn't um, by a future council over delegation because a chair is too busy with their own job or other I mean, my job is to come up with all kinds of a parade of horribles. So I can always do that. You know, uh,
Yeah. So
in,
part two of my thought, sorry, Tess, I don't mean to cut you off. So Paul, to where you're at, like we operate Head Start and it's a machine, the Office of Head Start. So what I would put forth is like the Head Start expenditures, especially like credit card or small expenses, go to our finance committee. So I would broaden it more than the treasurer. I would say, does the finance committee have a role in reviewing? I know it's after the fact, but we do that. And then does the executive committee have a role in like but I think that we have a finance committee that could look at the expenditures. And Chassis, you could probably compile those anyway, but I think the checks and balance, that's how it happens in Head Start. And they're a little bit like us. They have 2,500 regs and there's a lot of scrutiny from the federal government. So just a thought.
Um, would it be adequate to put in there that these approvals would be reported to the finance committee or the treasurer of the MRC? Or put and
I
the
certainly like the finance committee suggestion.
Can I
would
ask
it be,
a technical question?
yes, Tess, I'm sorry.
I am too, Tess, sorry.
Go first, Chastity.
Um, how's that different than what happens now with finance committee when Deb puts together her spreadsheet for every meeting to review the stuff? Would it just like have a asterisk next to it to say that I signed it instead of Pat? It's kind of like technical in the weeds, but I'm just wondering what it changes to add it in.
Yeah, Chastity, that was my question. Isn't I'm hoping that's something that's already happening.
I think, um, that's a good question for Deb. But my instinct is that what Deb gets right now is effectively a bank account statement that doesn't have maybe the level of detail that the executive director would provide about expenses authorized.
Yeah, I would say in the finance committee, we don't really get into the weeds of the specifics. For instance, in the last one, she reported how many contracts went out, but not what each individual contract was and how much it was. She reported a total and how many numbers, but we didn't discuss each contract.
So just to separate where Brendan was earlier, like, so there's administrative spending, like mileage, et cetera, and then there's contracts. So are we comfortable with the ED signing both of those? Just I've kind of lost my way a bit. Like where are we at with kind of approving or like a small expense versus signing a contract?
Well, I certainly, I think we can all agree on the administrative expenses. I think that should be very clear.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Do you agree with that, Tess?
Would the administrative include travel?
Yeah,
One category, basically, or two categories?
yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
I think it would essentially be everything except the grants. Because our job is to do the grants, so everything else is administrative to administer that.
And an example about Head Start, if we were operating Head Start, Chastity would show up at the finance committee meeting with those expenses articulated in writing. And the finance committee could ask questions like, why did you buy that rug for a classroom? So do we want that level of oversight, like for her to show up with like a spreadsheet of those things? This is again just administrative spending.
I don't think Chastity needs to show up. Well, Chastity goes to all of them. I do think that the treasurer or the chair of the finance committee should get a report of all of those.
And who do they get that from, Paul? Because I don't go to the finance committee.
I don't know if they get that right now.
Okay.
I don't know that they do.
I think they just get the bank account statement from the AG's office. I don't know that it goes into the level of detail that Joe is describing.
Yeah. What do you think of that? Well, I'll go to Tess first because we keep ignoring Tess.
I was just thinking, like, I think we kind of went into this conversation to try to take some of the administrative burden off, and I feel like we're moving in a direction of adding more. So I just want to check in. Like, I agree, Joe, when you had said, we hired Chastity, we want to empower her. I don't know what benefit it would be if she had to then report, I spent $30 on pens,
Mm-hmm.
$20 on printing.
Mm-hmm.
To me, we hired her because we trust her. So, I mean, I guess I would want to ask Chastity, like, would that be an administrative burden on you? I know you and Elizabeth have a lot on your plate, so I just want to check in on that from your perspective.
I mean, all of that stuff exists, but as you just talked, I don't see how it's literally just like approving stuff already coming in. So if it's just a matter of creating a folder and sharing those things, like whatever, or copying someone, I mean, it's fine. We can make it work. It's not like all of those things disappear. Like we have copies, so I don't know that it necessarily adds or takes away anything.
So just in terms of risk management, and I don't want to add more work, Chastity, to your plate. But we don't get financial statements monthly like an organization does. So like, do we, and we think, you are to Tass's point, we trust, but are there safeguards that the council has to put in place? And I'm totally supportive of this process, and I'm comfortable with really as broad as people want to make it. But do we feel like we need safeguards to sort of be able to have the checks and balances, say we know? And Brendan, is there Chassis, now that you've been in the role for a couple months, like, what do you get to, how do you manage it? How do you look at, what information comes to you to look at expenditures? Do you get
Um,
financial statements or anything like that?
so there's a reconciliation list, and Deb gets that monthly, and that's what she puts together a spreadsheet. But listening to you all talk, like technically, I can't even look up and see like that we've paid something. All of that is housed in the AG's office, and all I can do is just approve payment.
Mhm.
So in the checks and balances and all of the stuff we're asking about, like they're kind of separate things because I'm still just a figurehead. Even if I can approve, I'm still just a figurehead because all the money's in the AG's office, and like they have all the checks and balances there. And we technically still have a firewall for what we can or can't do.
Chastity, it wasn't clear to me your response to Tess's question. I think that's a real important question. Would it be a burden on you to report these expenditures to the chair of the finance committee or the treasurer?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, thanks. But Tess, I agree with you. You're right. When we get down into the weeds, we start adding administrative burdens to people. And we don't want to do that. And on the other hand, I want to make sure that we have enough guardrails so that when we don't have Chastity and Pat, we could have other people there that aren't as detail oriented, shall we say. Go ahead, Brendan.
On the burden piece, I had thought the point of this was relieving burden from the chair. And so I was more focused on that piece. On the checks and balances piece, I wonder if it makes sense for me and Chastity or some combination thereof between now and the council meeting to discuss between ourselves and also with my office, with our finance director and others in my office, about the sort of checks and balances that are in place, to Joe's questions, both in terms of what exists and what should ideally exist. To get at this kind of thing. Like, part of me thinks, a future executive director, an executive director of an organization, in my view, would want to be reporting those things so that there are additional checks and balances. So, the executive director has the authority to, take care of these things in a nimble way, but, gives the information to the council so that the information is out there and available, and it's not just all sitting on that ED's head. But I just want to offer that, either I in combination with Chastity, talk with how it works in my office and what checks and balances are in place or exist. I mean, my belief is that my office would be interested in the council, having, clear and good oversight over the funds. I think, and I'm sort of, I'm carrying on probably a little too long here, but sort of the structure of what it sounds like what we're talking about is, the council would vote to approve, let's say, I know we're trying to separate out admin from grants, but let's just lump them together for the purposes of the conversation. The council votes to approve a given expenditure, whether it's admin or whether it's a grant. And if the idea is that then the council is totally out of the picture in terms of the logistics of moving forward, right? Under this proposal, the executive director would, oversee or actually handle the drafting of the contract. The executive director would then, have the authority to execute the contract. And to approve, say there's multiple expenditures, whether it's under an invoice or under multiple payments. And then the council, wouldn't really participate otherwise except to have occasional finance committee oversight. So those are, again, a jumble of thoughts. It's just kind of what I'm thinking about.
So I sort of think the framework is in place, Brendan. I mean, in theory, the Program and Grants Committee starts things. We hear about it like it was heavy lifting. Then we have a finance committee. So like I think that members of the council and the staff are really very transparent in the process. And all that is documented, recorded. So like I'm good with the language. I feel like if we could figure out the checks and balance that you just described with your office and Chastity, like we have got to have this, we've got to be efficient. That's my thing. We've got to make sure that we're able to pay mileage, get the grant signed and out the door, the money out the door. That's my charge on the council, I think. We've done a lot of we're in the cycle now. We've made the decisions. Now it's getting the business done.
Right. And on the point about the driving to get contracts executed, we're, this, in an ideal world, the contracts are done in a way where there's sufficient planning that the contracts can be executed at a council meeting where everybody's already there and there isn't additional driving around. But as, Joe's pointed out, that isn't the way it has been. Ideally, that's just because things are in the startup phase and structures and processes are being sorted out. But I can't always guarantee that, um, the ideal scenario is going to play out every time.
Go ahead, Tess.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about protections, guardrails. If we were to go through with this proposed amendment and say we put a periodic limit of, say, 3 months, where the chair could designate the ED to sign contracts, but someone had mentioned that, say that that was in writing, like expressly granted permission to sign something that the council had are already pre-approved, and say fast forward 5 years, there's an executive director in bad faith sign something without that expressed approval. Would we have protection as a council?
I'll jump in, but I think Chastity or from the prior executive director, there may be more information in the staff level than I have. There had been connections made or attempted to be made a few months ago with the state's effectively kind of insurance office to regarding um, risk management for the council. But I made the connection, but I stepped out of the interactions to allow it to go along at its normal pace. So I'm not, we could revisit that and find out what the status of that is.
I wasn't a part of any of that and didn't get any information from that. So Elizabeth or Grayson, if they were part of it, maybe, but otherwise it would have to be reestablished.
And we can do that.
It sounds to me like all of us, Tess and Joe, myself, um, like the wording and don't really have any specific uh, disagreements with the wording of this amendment. Am I interpreting you right, Joe and Tess? Okay. Um, I do like the idea, Chastity, if it's not doesn't increase your burden, to give a report to the chair of the finance committee, or you could even do it during the finance committee meetings, uh, where we could see these expenditures. And I know when I was writing up the minutes of the finance committee, I would have liked to put in more details on the expenditures. Not so much the administrative ones, but we put out a lot of grants. And I think it would have been nice for me to be able to report all of those, but I really didn't have that accessible.
I agree, Paul. I think that it is important at this phase to chassis not to add work, but that, like, again, I'm using the Head Start model. Like, they monitor my expenses. They want the board to monitor if I make an expense. So like it's a bit different with grants, but I think if you could think about like how you would separate that. So like if you're buying a pen, I know this might seem tedious, but we're building this plane as we're flying it. So if you have ideas about how you would report that back, because I see the finance committee, even though it's after the fact, doing continuous quality improvement. So if there is issues, then you guys could correct them. It will be after the fact, but I think at least there is sort of a process in place that's monitoring uh, expenditures. Does that seem like it's a lot of work for you, Chastity?
No, because I feel like that's the reconciliation list that already exists that Deb gets and compiles, so it doesn't feel like it really adds anything. I'm gonna note, just putting it out there so it's on record. This obviously doesn't mean I will approve any of my own pay or mileage. The chair will still have to approve that, but just get it out there before I question.
I don't know what you mean by the reconciliation list. I don't believe that was brought to the finance committee.
Deb, yeah, they get it monthly. Like when Deb puts her little presentation together with the different breakdowns,
Yeah.
she has the reconciliation list of every dollar that comes out of the recovery fund, every dollar we've spent.
Okay.
And she breaks it, like thinking on the last one, she put staff expenses and it shows like my pay, Elizabeth's pay. She doesn't put people's names, and it had Sarah Yasner. So like it's there and it's broken down. So that already exists. Just
Okay.
how the whole committee is receiving it is different and not as detailed, but the treasurer has it.
Okay, great. So Deb has all of that. You are already doing what we're asking
And
in the reconciliation. Okay.
and Paul, that the reconciliation is that bank account statement. I was using, shorthand to refer to it. And it goes to the treasurer. I don't know that the rest of the finance committee gets it also. As Chastity is describing, they get or at least see the treasurer's, report about it.
Mhm.
But I don't know that they get the original reconciliation statement.
Okay. Maybe we can
And
discuss that at the MRC meeting of whether the finance committee should at least just see it, it in case we have questions on it. Yes, Grayson.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up something that I remembered, Deb. Um, Deb had some concerns about showing the kind of raw reconciliation lists at public recorded meetings just because it has personal information of the council's employees and members on it. But I think that's something she would be willing to discuss further if it came up at the council meeting.
Brendan, what are your thoughts on that? If she, I agree. I think Grayson, I remember her saying something about that at the last finance committee meeting.
yeah, I think it's an important point.
Yeah.
I think well, she should be part of the conversation about um what additional information, if any, that she would need from well, we're talking about the finance committee, not just the treasurer. But I think she's an important part of the conversation. There in theory there are things we could do to redact the reconciliation statements. That's some additional work. But to the extent that the other members of the finance committee want a copy of the reconciliation statement, it seems to me that they're entitled to it, or they, I don't have a reason to say, like, I don't have a reason to say no to them. But Grayson's point is a very, very strong one, and it's an important one.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Grayson. Appreciate it.
So it seems like we don't have all the puzzle pieces, like without Pat here and others. So Paul,
No, yeah, Joe, we don't have quorum to vote on this, but I think what I can report to the MRC is that we discussed this. And in general, we had good agreement on this possible amendment uh, from the members who were present, and that we would like the discussion that could occur maybe in the finance committee itself about how much detail of the expenditures do each finance committee member want to have? And, and while being very cognizant of privacy of the staff and names put up.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I'll just add so you have for your knowledge, Pat and Betsy both said they were supportive of the recommended amendment via email. That obviously doesn't count in a vote, but at least you know why. And
Yeah,
Pat and
thank
I
you.
had a lot of discussions about this.
Okay, great. I really appreciate your work on this, Chastity. When I saw that, I didn't open it till last night. I tried to have one full day where I didn't do any work. And I got it until about 7 p.m.
That's good. Well, and
Um,
Chastity, I hope you hear, I mean, I'm totally supportive of this and I don't want you over, burdened, and we need you to be doing important things. And I think again, we're like just building this model, but and to what Brendan, we were talking about kind of real-time work, we don't have enough staff. Like we can't, a 4 hour meeting, we can't, because we're deliberating things. So like for us to get through what we did this past year was Herculean. So I think I will keep sort of banging on that it's just, we still are kind of under resourced when it comes to the staff, the role of staff. And I think if Chastity had more staff, it becomes clear on how things flow. But right now, with the Elizabeth, Grace, and you, Chastity, it's just limited. So I don't want you to hear me wanting to burden you more because that's not my intent.
Yeah, Joe, just to piggyback off that, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that I don't think we need transparency in finance or those things aren't valuable. I just want to be really mindful of what responsibilities we're putting on an already pretty burdened staff. And I think the more that we ask to require, we need to look at what we're willing to do in terms of hiring more capacity. Because
Yeah.
I just think that, and I agree, we want guardrails for the future. And I think there's trust in Chastity and Pat, and but at the same time, I think where we are right now with our current capacity, we need to be really mindful of additional things that we're putting on them. Because I feel like the feedback we get from the public is we're slow, we're
Mhm.
inefficient, we don't move quickly. So
Mhm.
like I'm also keeping that in my mind of like our ultimate goal of like wanting to get money out there to help communities.
Yeah.
okay. Any other comments on this? Next on the agenda is other business. Any other business people want to discuss today? Well, seeing that there's no other business, should we adjourn to 8 minutes early? Okay. Thank you for
Good
everyone
job.
for the discussion, and I'm sorry for Maggie and Pat and Betsy that they weren't here to participate. We'll see you all 2 weeks from yesterday.
Great.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you. Bye-bye
Bye.
now.
Bye, all.